Guys, the Technics EAH A800 is pretty phenomenal, but Sony outdid themselves with the WH-1000 XM5. So we're gonna go through all the aspects of these two awesome headphones and let you experience these fantastic products for yourselves. We'll decide the winner using math and puns. Goedendag weer, DH Army. Desperate hotties rank male earwigs.
So at first glance, these look very different. And yes, the design language and build quality reflect the reality that these are two very different Japanese audio companies. The Technics look more solid and substantial, but the plastic is actually quite creaky when you do this. This is why we prefer the Sony's build. There are fewer joints, fewer moving parts, and all-round less creaking. The Sony also has a modern, updated design with a stylish yoke and very subtle Sony branding on the headband. However, as we said in our full review, for all you oily-ass homies out there, the XM5 tends to attract a lot of grease, so you need to wipe it down regularly. The Technics also looks good while being relatively oil-free, but it's not what you would call subtle. The choice to print their serif font-based logo on the ear cups is also not for everyone, and we'll give that to the Sony as well. Where the Technics does pull ahead of the Sony is that it's foldable. It's slightly smaller, not world-changing in our opinion. Their case is also a hard shell case like Sony's, but somehow Sony's feels flimsier. The Technics case is a bit smaller and is shaped like a guitar pick, and that always gets points from us. So in this case, we give Technics the win. However, none of these headphones come with any kind of water or dust resistance rating. A bit of a shame that we don't have that in this day and age. Sony even explicitly has this card showing that you shouldn't sweat wearing these headphones. How does one do that exactly? Have you seen the hair on Rowan's head and my face? Either way, -1 point for both. Wow, I feel powerful. In terms of controls, Sony relies mainly on its touchpad for volume, media, and call control. It does have buttons, but those are just reserved for pairing, powering on or off, switching the ANC mode, and checking the battery levels. The Technics takes the opposite approach, with most of what it does assigned to the buttons. This might be just my fat fingers, but I've used the Technics for a couple of weeks now and don't like the ridges on the buttons. The multifunction button that does play, pause, and a number of other things is a bit depressed, and I ended up hitting the volume down button quite a few times. And you can use the touch surface on the Technics for switching ANC modes and some basic call functions. In this latest generation, Sony's touch controls have improved so much that we far prefer Sony's touch surface, and this gives the Sony the edge.
When it comes to comfort, the one thing that is like chalk and cheese is the weight. The Technics feel substantial, and it's very unlikely that you'll not notice it after a while of wearing. But the Sony is the lightest noise-cancelling headphones of this class that we've ever tested. In fact, it almost feels too light to be taken seriously. The headband adjustment mechanism doesn't have discrete ratchets though, whereas the Technics does. But again, weight-wise, the comparison is not even funny. What is a win on the Technics side is the ample padding that keeps your pinne away from the drivers, giving it that Bose quiet comfort feeling, you know? The feeling where your ears are suspended in mid-air, just levitating off the ground, like it's weightless and the heavens themselves have descended upon. So yeah, even though you'd think Sony would take the win for the sheer weight difference, the Technics plush and roomy pads are an advantage that Sony doesn't have. And when either feels uncomfortable, you can take them off for a break and Smart Pause will automatically kick in. The controls will be automatically blocked on the Sony once you've taken them off your head. The Technics allows you to enable this setting to block touches if you want from the app. This avoids any accidental touches after you've removed your headphones. Nice touch, Sony and Technics. I'm gonna drop a bomb here. No, Karen, don't call the cops. The Technics A800 sounds great, but
what?
It just misses that little bit of...
What did he say? Isn't Technics known to be better?
Yes, the Technics has excellent clarity, vocals are crystal clear, and they do that smoothing of the higher frequencies such that you will almost never have a fatiguing experience. But the bass, the Technics has what I'd call a very restrained bass response. Sony just has that little bit extra. It's a little about the speed and a little about the presence in the mix. Somehow turning up the bass on the Techniques using the EQ just muddies up the sound. A complex layered song like Hideaway by Jacob Collier really highlights the bass control very well. So I think if you're a bass head, I'd pick the Sony. And Sony also has an app that you can use to tune the sound to your liking. And then the EQ adjustments actually work. But the Techniques win on every other aspect of sound. The clarity, as we mentioned before, in the mids and the highs. The default tuning on the Sony is super bass heavy and congested sounding. But here's the thing, Sony's default tuning actually works when you're out and about. You know, when you're walking or you're moving, that bass helps. Or if you're working out, for example, and you need that bass to really push you to do that last rep. But remember we mentioned about that Sony no sweat warning? I don't know, I'm confused. Anyway, when you use these headphones wired, the tables turn, or should I say the cables turn. The Techniques is clearly the better sounding pair of headphones wired, including the bass, which makes us think it isn't really a driver problem, it's more on wireless that the bass doesn't perform as well. But you know what? Don't believe us? We'll have sound samples at the end of this video in 4 or 5 different genres, and there will be full high quality source recordings available for our members and patrons. For us, the real problem with the Technics A800 isn't that the microphones are bad or they're loud or they produce distortion. None of that. It's more about the sound of the voice at lower levels. So let me start speaking quite softly to you and tell me how my voice sounds then. So, popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. Popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. So we think it has like a lower noise threshold under which it cuts all sound. So if you're a mumbler or a whisperer or just a soft-spoken person in general, you will have to speak up if you have these headphones or get the Sony. So let's see if the Sony does a little better in that test. Popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. Popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. Popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. What did you think? So guys, all the calls that I've made on the Sony WH-1000 XM5, people have always told me that I've sounded pretty good. So there's a little bit of wind now, so it's a good time to test if the wind affects the phone call quality on the Sony WH-1000 XM5. Popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. Popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. So that's that vessel, sea vessel going there. Can you hear that in the background of my voice? Because I'm using the Technics A800. It's also a little bit windy now, so let me go a bit closer to the canal while still being safe, not putting myself in any danger. So popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. Popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. What do you think? Could you discern my voice from the wind? Let us know in the comments down below. All right, let's do a sound test with some vehicles passing by to see how my voice sounds when there's all kinds of engine sounds and car sounds. So popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. Popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. And now the Technics A800 with cars and vehicles passing by. They're not very noisy cars, but there is, of course, traffic sound and the sound of the rubber tires on the road. And some cars go faster than others. So how clear is my voice here? Popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. Popsicle, ice, icicle, testing. 1, 2, 3. Could you hear my voice and could you discern the background noise from my voice, or was there no background noise at all? Let us know.
So our conclusion, while speaking very quietly, it feels like the Technics cuts out at times, but the Sony had no issues. If you're a mumbler or a soft-spoken, then don't pick the Technics. This pattern follows on to noisy conditions as well. Sony does decently with noise and the voice is never grating, but the voice in the Technics was a little bit clearer and filtered out the background noise a little bit better. This can change with the kind of sound you have, but we still preferred the Sony. In windy conditions, we enjoy using both as they cut out wind reasonably well and find ourselves taking calls outdoors with minimal complaints on the other end of those calls. But you could still hear the wind on the Technics. We never thought we'd say this, but Sony is a true champ for wind as well. A clean sweep. Wow, Sony. Alright guys, let's not muck about and get down to business. Let's talk fuckman controls. Both are great, but great doesn't cut it when you're a fuckman. We've got to give it to the Technics for this round. Both headphones can do the basics of answering and hanging up a call, volume controls and changing ANC mode. And Technics tends to use more button presses than the Sony, which is mostly touching the touchpad. But a recent firmware upgrade has made it possible to use the touch controls on the Technics for controlling calls too. The Technics can mute the microphone on the headphones, whereas the Sony cannot. So a point to Technics.
While we move to the extra features you get on board these headphones, let's stick to the working fuckman theme. Something we find ourselves often talking about is multi-point connections, just because we at least need our headphones to work with a laptop and a phone. But okay, you have multiple devices, right? A phone, two phones, maybe a laptop and a phone with a tablet thrown in there. Well, we do too, and we tested a bunch of devices to see which combinations play most reliably with each other on both these headphones. That was a lot of work, guys, so give this video a thumbs up for the hard work if you want to. Both these headphones can connect simultaneously to two devices. That's what most reviews are going to tell you, but we're going to go unnecessarily in depth DHRME style. First off, to use either of these headphones most reliably, you always have to pause the first device to start playing on the second device. Now, the Technics does work without pausing first and then hitting play, but it isn't always reliable. We asked you guys which devices you switched between, and Windows and Android came up as the pair that was most used. Certainly wasn't expecting that. So here's the thing, using this combination Android Windows, resuming music on Android was very glitchy and unreliable, whereas when you hit play on Windows, it almost always worked. On iPhone and Android, we found again that the Android part of that equation was a little bit buggy. There tended to be a lot of stutter when switching to Android. Hitting play on iPhone played the audio immediately, but hitting play on Android took a couple of attempts. Also, you have to pause on iPhone and then play on Android, like we said earlier. Now, Mac and Android is a bit buggy too, but works a bit better than iPhone and Android. And those of you living in Apple's ecosystem, though, will be happy to know that iPhone and Mac was the most reliable pairing that we found. It almost always worked. Most of the times you could even switch without pausing audio on the first device. So yes, that applesauce can be quite sweet. And finally, surprisingly, iPhone and Windows was a pretty stable switching experience too. So what's the common thread here for Technics? Android bad? Maybe LDAC with Android isn't working great when it comes to switching. And that's the thing, right? So Technics can do multipoint with LDAC enabled on Android. So we'll give it that point.
So Sony doesn't support multipoint with LDAC enabled, but we're left wondering if the bugginess on Android is the reason Sony chose to skip this? First off, you have a device list in the app. You can disconnect or go into pairing mode from the device list. You can also switch devices from there. In fact, on the device list, you can also play or pause music on the other device and control its volume. You can also fix audio to one device in the app list so the audio doesn't switch automatically, and you can unfix it if you don't need it after a while. If you don't hit pause first, however, you will find that the music continues to play, but you don't hear anything from the second device. This is typical Sony. You have all the choices you would ever want as a customer. And the best part is it can also do the basics well. And it turns out that if you always pause on the first device and hit play on the other, it works almost 100% of the time with Android and iPhone and Windows and Mac. So that's a +1 for reliability. In addition to this, both these headphones connections can be pulled from a previously paired device, so no need to go to pairing mode. But since with Sony, you can do that from within the app and also see which device you're connected to. The Sony has the edge.
Both of these headphones come with voice prompts, and Sony has largely switched to tones instead of words. On the Technics, you can switch between many languages, but the default English prompts are resurfacing some trauma from my younger years in school, where I had a very shouty primary school teacher. I mean, just listen to this.
Bluetooth connected. Bluetooth connected. Ambient sound. Noise cancelling.
I think I might just stop switching ANC modes lest that very judgy voice chide me for what I'm doing. Also, while on voice prompts, why is Technics teacher weirdly shouting out the battery percentage when you're shutting down the headphones, not starting up? Every time you switch them off and take them off your head, you almost feel like you're missing out on something because you hear the voice going battery level, whatever. So, alright Technics, we're gonna take away part of a point for the prompt situation. Who's the teacher now? On the other hand, I guess we could kinda maybe possibly forgive them for it because it beat back in one hell of a battery. The Technics has more than 150% the battery life of the Sony. Let's not be a math teacher here. Technics can last you 50 hours and Sony 30 hours, both with ANC on. Now Sony's 30 hours is above average in itself, so the Technics is more of an A plus or an S at this level. Apart from battery, what else are these headphones packing? Well, both come with your standard USB-C to USB-A cable for charging, and no, neither can play audio over USB. They both also come with a 3.5 to 3.5 mm headphone cable, and yes, you can interchange and use one cable on the other. Since the XM5, the Sony no longer gives you an airplane adapter, whereas the Technics does. Good try Technics, but no points for that. Stupid airline industry needing special adapters to...
Out of both these headphones, Sony's commitment to recycling and the environment comes as most obvious to us. Technics' site doesn't talk anything about sustainability, but that probably is because its holding company Panasonic publishes the sustainability reports and details. But given that the Sony itself has recycled automobile parts and zero plastic packaging, we'll give this round to the Sony. Okay, we expected the active noise cancelling to be an easy win for Sony's latest generation top-of-the-line headphones. But you know what? It wasn't. After lots of back and forth A/B testing, it's clear that Sony attenuates more sound overall, especially with higher end sounds. But the difference isn't really huge. The Technics is pretty good, even though it's short of the Sony. In fact, although we'll give the point to the Sony for this, we cannot say that this will make or break your purchase decision. Here's a quick sample of the ANC test. See if you can hear the difference. Headphones are recommended, and keep those headphones on. We'll be back in transparency mode. Before we go to transparency, it's clear that Sony has more techniques to adjust noise cancelling. Speak to chat. When you talk, ambient mode kicks in automatically. Quick attention, put your hand over the right ear cup to pause music and kick in ambient mode. There are custom ANC settings for every position and location you can think of. So just for that sheer customization, we give the win to the Sony. And now we go to transparency.
Okay, so let's let you experience how the transparency mode sounds. Right now you're listening to me with no headphones on, so it's just the binaural microphones. Let's start with the Techniques. So you have something called transparent mode, which makes everything audible. So if I tap the table or if I hit my chest, it makes everything audible. And then there's this attention mode, which I'll switch to now. That's the attention mode. And do you still hear the tapping of the tables? And do you still hear? So I think this would be more useful in a case where, you are on a plane or you're in a very noisy environment and you basically want to zero in on the voice. It makes this voice sound a bit unnatural, but it might come useful in certain conditions. So what do you think? Attention mode or transparent mode on the Technics? And now let's put the Sony on. Alright, you're now hearing me through the transparency mode on the Sony WH-1000 XM5. It's also very good. You again get that sliding scale. So right now we're on 20. This is what 10 would sound like. And this is what ambient mode 1 would sound like. Let's put it back to 20. Alright, so that's on 20. And similar to the Techniques, you also have this focus on voice checkbox that helps you focus on voice. So if it would sound something like pop, pop, popsicle, ice, ice, icicle, test, test, testing. Okay, I need something to make a sound. Why not we use the Techniques case? Pop, pop, popsicle, ice, ice, icicle, test, test, testing, 1, 2, 3. Pop, pop, popsicle, ice, ice, icicle, test, test, testing, 1, 2, 3. Pop, pop, popsicle, ice, ice, icicle, test, test, testing, 1, 2, 3. So those were my percussion skills. And to be honest, for us, the difference between the Techniques and the Sony is it pretty small for ambient mode or transparency and isn't going to make or break your buying decision. But since we're counting, let's give the transparency to the Techniques.
Something these Japanese audio behemoths have gotten not too wrong is the privacy aspect of the apps. In the case of the Sony, you have to send a picture to get the best 360 audio experience, and Sony is pretty adamant that they throw away the picture after it's done. That's also what she said. And after all, it's a very niche case. What Sony also lets you do is opt in to a lot of data sharing, but you can use the app without opting in. Techniques also has a major privacy policy which I did not accept, but could still use the app. Good on these companies for making things transparent. If you've read any of these privacy policies and know more about it, leave a comment down below. It's something we also want to zoom into. Both the apps are fairly fully featured, and aside from the things we've already talked about, they work reasonably well and reliably. Sony's app does seem a bit dated now, but it pretty much does everything we need it to do and works well on Android and iOS. It's the same for Techniques, but the sheer amount of ANC, multi-device, and other customization gives the edge to the Sony. So which one should you get? Well, both are priced very similarly, but Sony often has the biggest sales and discounts as we've seen with their older models. So do check the links in the description for latest prices. Given all the points we just discussed and these points on screen, we're pretty confused about which one we would choose. It's very, very, very close. Maybe the Sony? What do you guys think? You've not been getting no conclusion, and we've been DHRME. Namaste, sound samples coming right up.
Way back when we didn't care what they said. People could stare, I didn't give a damn, cause I was being next to you. Way back when we didn't care what they said. People could stare, I didn't give a damn, cause all I needed was my friend. Way back when, way back when, way back when, way back when we didn't care what they said. People could stare, I didn't give a damn, cause I was being next to you. Way back when we didn't care what they said. People could stare, I didn't give a damn, cause all I needed was my friend. Way back when, way back when, way back when, way back when we didn't care what they said. People could stare, I didn't give a damn, cause I was being next to you. Way back when we didn't care what they said. People could stare, I did